نادم يا إلهي أكاد ألوم بحسرات قلبي وكم ذا تمنيت ألا أقول بنجواي يوما عصيتك ربي.
Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. May peace and blessing be upon you all. I am Basim Jannoon and I will be your host for today's event. On behalf of the Muntada Islamic Forum, I would like to welcome you all and thank you for attending this event. Also special thanks to our brother Abdullah Al Andalusi who came all the way from London to give this lecture. The agenda of today's event will be a 45-minute lecture about secularism, followed by a 15-minute question and answer session. Before leaving the floor to our speaker, I would like to share with you a briefing about Brother Abdullah Al Andalusi. Abdullah Al Andalusi was a former Christian of Portuguese descent who embraced Islam at a very young age and has studied Islam in depth ever since. He has a long experience of working in the Muslim community and has activities involving writing, Islamic revivalism, philosophy, sociology, and anthropology. Abdullah has delivered talks throughout the UK in universities, colleges, as well as Islamic centers, and has also appeared in various TV programs too. He also engaged in a number of discussions with atheists, secularists, Christians, on a variety of topics, and is a member of Muslim Debate Initiative, a public discussion forum which promotes human dialogue and debate. Now I would like to welcome to the stage Brother Abdullah Al Andalusi for an insightful
I would like to thank the University of Lebanon for hosting this event as part of my tour, and also special thanks to Muntada and the Islam Forum for their kindness and generosity and hospitality, which has truly humbled me. So today, this lecture is about secularism, is it the way forward? And you will hear a lot about the subject of secularism in one way or the other. Sometimes it goes with different names. Sometimes they say civil democratic government. Sometimes it's called just secularism, and other times it's just called modern government. But why this topic? Why this topic of is secularism the way forward? Well, as we can see, there is political instability and problems throughout the world, but also in the Muslim world. And we also see that secularism is an aspect of the most dominant civilization in the world, which is the West, or referred to as the West. And it is promoted to and adopted by virtually all countries in the world which have a colonialist past and were affected by colonialism. And of course, the topic is very relevant today because there has been uprisings in the Muslim world for pro-Islamic objectives and pro-Islamic movements, which are against Islamic, which were against the secular regimes. And we also see, even in America, the discussion of secularism is a very big debate because there is a number of Christian movements in America who are pushing for more Christian morality in politics and America based on Christian values. So we see that this topic is not only just important in the Muslim world, but also it's being questioned in around the world. Now, I suppose the one question that we have to ask ourselves is, what is secularism? Because you've heard this word a lot, secularism. What does it actually mean? And it goes by many different definitions, but there is one key definition, which is the separation of church and state, if you hear the European definition. And the reason why they say church and state is because for them, the Christian church was an institution that had political power, but it didn't have any political laws. And so the problem in Europe from its history was that the Christian clerics and priests tried to gain political power, but there was no laws in the Christian religion to implement. So really the problem was that these people were saying, follow our authority, but they didn't have any system to apply. And so when there was oppression occurring under the church, people would blame the church, and they would say that the problem is the church is being involved in politics. And so the first understanding to a European of secularism is that the church and the state should be kept separate. But of course, in this day and age, when they encounter many other cultures who do not have a church or institution like a church, they try to then change the meaning to mean a separation of politics from all spiritual and non-materialistic concerns. Or according to the Encyclopedia Britannica, secularism is an indifference to or rejection or exclusion of religion and religious considerations. But like any product, secularism is being sold to you with some promises. And they say that all these problems that you face in the Muslim world, under the kind of regimes that we live under, they can be solved by secularism as a product that they're going to sell to you like this bottle. Take secularism, it will give you some solutions. And we're going to go through some of these claims and see if they're true or not. Just applying thoughts on it, just to actually question it. So we see one argument for secularism, an argument why they say we should keep religion away from politics, is because they say that religion forces people to be good. And being good shouldn't be because you are forced to be good. This is the argument. And so they say that in a secular state, it would prevent hypocrisy, or nifaq in Arabic, by people who want to be religious can be religious, and people who don't want to be religious will not be forced to be religious. And this would be a better system where you have sincere, mukhlis, people who are mukhlis. This is the claim. But is that really true? What you actually see, what really actually happens, is actually the opposite of that. What you'll find, if you just look at secular countries like America, I'll give you an example in America. The Christians, the majority of people in America are Christian. A big majority of Christians are very conservative, so they believe in a lot of the very family values, and they are against abortion, and they don't believe that homosexuality is immoral. So most Americans are very conservative. But when they try to make laws to ban certain immoral practices, for example, maybe prostitution, or they want to ban prostitution, or they want to ban public drinking of alcohol in certain areas. Alcohol is banned in public in certain areas of America, it's actually true. But to do this, they have to pretend it's not a religious reason. So when people who are religious in America want to implement some moral laws, they have to pretend, from a secular perspective, what they are doing should be taken seriously. So the Christians or people who are religious, they have to be like hypocrites to pretend that they are secular just to be heard. Because if they said that, well, I want to implement this law because the majority of us, we all believe in the Bible says this is right, this is wrong, so we want to implement this, you will not be listened to. So you have to produce some other reason, and you have to, which we all know is the reason why these Christians are doing that, why the Christians believe that. And we see that the political scientist, Hunter Baker, he noticed this when he said that people argue for the separation of church and state on the religious basis that God would not tolerate the kind of hypocritical allegiance brought on by confessional regimes. The alternative presented by secularism commits the same sin in a different direction. Secularists ask that individuals with religious reasons pretend to think on another basis. So basically saying the same thing as what I said, but it is noticed. What we see is that even in secular regimes in the Muslim world, if you are an Islamic party, you have to pretend to be secular, just to be taken seriously and to avoid being banned by that country. So, instead of preventing hypocrisy, it creates hypocrisy. But also, another point is that the people who argue that secularism prevents hypocrisy does not understand Islam. The purpose of Islam, or the Sharia, is not to force people who want to be hypocrite or not religious to be religious. The point of the Sharia is that the people who want to be religious can do so with no obstacles. The forcing them or pushing them or social pressure. For example, if you want to be religious and you go out into society, and in society you see gambling shops, and you see alcohol bars and clubs and pubs which are influencing your children, influencing your friends, influencing you. I heard a story of one brother who said that a sister who was working as an air hostess, she put on hijab and she was fired from her job. It seems that in the secular system, if you are the munafiq is rewarded, and the person who's religious is punished. So the choice is really who is dominant? The people who are morally good and are religious, or the people who are hypocrites and who don't have that, who don't want to live by the moral basis they claim they profess. So what did the Prophet Muhammad, what did he do? He made it very simple. The society was a society whereby the good was promoted and bad was prohibited. And if you want to be a irreligious person, if you don't want to be a religious person, you can go into your own house and do whatever you want inside your own house, in private. If you want to drink alcohol, you can do it inside your house. You don't take it outside your house and you affect society. Because as human beings, we are social creatures. We affect each other. Even in the West, they have a lot of regulation of what you can show on TV and what you can show on media and advertising. They have even laws preventing people from inciting hatred against different races, like racism. They ban racism. Why is that? It's because they know that humans influence each other. We influence each other. So why have people in the public, why have the people who are bad people, why give them the freedom to influence society? If they want to be bad, they can be bad by themselves in their house. But the Sharia creates a society whereby if you want to be a good Muslim, you can be a good Muslim. And we see that Allah says in the Quran, I've translated, that Allah doesn't want to make a burden for us because man was created weak. Humans are weak. All of us have committed sins. All of us will continue to commit sins. We will be imperfect people because we are insan. We can't expect us to be perfect. And so the Sharia has come to help us. It's not come to force us, it's come to help us be good people by creating a society that does not push us or pressure us to do bad things. And so this is an alternative which secularism does not help us with. So I asked the secularists, which would you prefer? A society of open hypocrisy and open corruption, or a society where corruption and hypocrisy is hidden and suppressed into people's own houses, and people who want to be good in public, they are the ones who help inform politics and direct the country and help the country towards a good path. It's not, isn't it funny that no one trusts politicians, that politicians are always viewed as always doing nifaq? Why is that? Because to be a politician in a secular country, you have to lie to everyone to pretend, I will give you this, you support support me, I'll give you that if you support me. And they say one thing to one group, and they say another thing to other group. So who is the most successful person? The person who is mukhlis, who says, look, I have a belief, and maybe only one group supports me, but I will stick to this belief. Or the guy who says to one group, I support you, and says to another group, I support you, and then they elect him, it's going to be the munafiq, the hypocrite. He will get the power, not the person who is mukhlis, not the person who is sincere. So is that the kind of political system we want? What are the other arguments for secularism? They say that people disagree on religion. So that, well, some people are Christian, some people are Muslim, some people are Jewish, some people are Buddhist. So how can you have a country or a system which is based on one particular set of values and not something that everyone can agree with? Well, I have a simple response to that. Since when does anyone agree on politics? Is there anything in politics that we agree on? You'll find when you maybe in discussions between, if you see a table of people, 5 people around the table talking about politics, you'll probably hear 10 different opinions about politics. So they're saying that we can't agree on religion, so we should unite on a neutral politics where we can all agree on, but no one agrees on politics. And it's funny when you see in Europe, when they say we're a secular system and we have a system where everyone can agree on the basis of religion. And when it comes to Muslim countries, for example, let's say Egypt, when recently in Egypt they were worried that the Ikhwan Muslimin would establish an Islamic State, and the Christians, who are only 10% of the population, said, we should be involved in the constitution. We should have a say in that constitution. But in France, 10% of the population of France is Muslim. Did the French ask the Muslims if they want to be represented in the constitution? No. But they expect us to not establish Islam because there are 10% of the population who disagree. Even though in France there's 10% of the population who are not believing in the materialism of secularism, but they have to accept it because they're a minority. So it's one rule for us, a different rule for the Europeans. And we see that in secularism, when people say, oh, but people can unite behind secularism, it gives a common basis. And I say, well, really, what kind of secularism? There is hard secularism, soft secularism, imperialism, secular humanism, egalitarianism, socialism, meritocracy, fascism, socialism, utilitarianism, libertarianism, feminism, conservatism, liberalism, neoconservatism, anarchism, and also Christian Democrats, like the government of Germany are Christian Democrats. So which version of secularism, or which madhab, which school of thought of secularism are you going to apply? It was funny that the Turkish politician, Bülent Ali, he was complaining when one group of secularists were oppressing another group of secularists in Turkey, and he complained, he said, all these problems occur because of different interpretations of the principles of secularism. So if you're telling us that you can't apply a state based on a religion because not everyone agrees on that religion, then you can't apply secularism because no one agrees on what type of secularism you want to apply, and even how you interpret it, and what policies you implement on it. And the funny thing is that more people, more Muslims, agree on the political system of Islam than secularists who agree on the political system of secularism, on the structure of it. In terms of the political system of Islam, it is the Khilafah. How many different types of Khilafah are there? There's only ever been one. The system in Islam, there's one leader, he appoints his wazirs, they have governors, the wula, and they have amirs, and so on and so forth, and they apply the Sharia, and in most aspects of the Sharia in terms of the legal system, there's actually more agreement amongst Muslims than amongst secularists as to what kind of secularism and what the laws of secularism are. That's why you see differences across secular countries as to various kinds of laws and ideas. Yet they say that Islam is impractical, but secularism is very practical. Well, that's not the case. So, secularism does not establish the case that people must be secular because no one can agree on religion, no one can agree on politics. Actually, I'll tell you what, if the criteria is agreement, ijma, if that's the criteria of the system, then everything, humans disagree on everything. There are even some there's a group of Christians in America who basically reject that the earth is round. They believe the earth is flat. They're called the Flat Earth Society. You can Google them and see it yourself. There are people who believe that government is wrong, that you should not have a government. They're called anarchists. What about their opinions? See, if you want to go by the lowest common denominator, what everyone all agrees on, then you'll come up with nothing, because humans don't agree on anything. There has to come to a time where you say, I'm going to establish a state based on this particular idea and then implement that idea. But it does not mean that there's no place for other people. Because in Islam, in the Islamic system, there is a place for people who are not Muslim. And in fact, the Islamic system is more tolerant and more multicultural than the Western system. I'll give you an example. In England and Canada, currently, there's a big debate about whether Muslims can have courts for their own, just marriage, no marriage and divorce issues, just to discuss marriage, no hudud, no punishment, just marriage issues and the divorce issues. And it was argued by the secularists that no, if you want to get married or divorced, you go by the secular courts, you don't go by any religious courts. And they kind of prohibited the authority of religious courts. Although England has some kind of leeway, but basically it's only voluntary. But even in Canada, they banned it. In France, they're not permitting it. But under the Islamic system, Jews and Christians have their own courts. Not just even for marriage and divorce, but even for punishments as well. They even have their own police, their own shurta, right? The Jews and Christians. They were like, when a Jew came to the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam to ask, when the Jews came to him to ask him to judge them between them, he got the Torah. He judged them according to the Torah, to their own book. That is multiculturalism, true pluralism, true acceptance. But in the West, they say it's one law for everybody. And who makes the law? Just a small amount of politicians who are secularists. That does not accept people's different beliefs. And now in the West, there is a big debate, a big problem with Muslim immigration. They say that Muslims are not taking our culture, they have to follow our culture, they're not following our culture. The question is not about whether Muslims are following the law or breaking the law. No, that's not the question, that's not the problem they have. It's that we're not following their culture. We're not following what they're doing. And they can't accept that. But in Islamic lands for 1,300 years, we had Jews, Muslims, Christians living side by side. We never forced the Jews or the Christians to become Muslim. We never forced them to have to take our culture. We never forced them to implement Sharia or live under Sharia. So Islam is more tolerant towards the minorities and even gives them their own space, their own courts. It even gives them this without forcing them to follow our culture. We also see the argument that secularism creates a neutral government, and I suppose in the context of Lebanon, when there are different religions in Lebanon, different religious communities, some people are arguing that a secular government will make a neutral government, where a government is neutral to all different groups. But I just have a very simple example to point you in. Well, look at every other secular country in the world. Okay, let's look at Iraq, where they applied a kind of secular system after the invasion by the Americans. Was that objective and neutral between the different groups? No, because in secularism, the only thing that counts are numbers of humans, and numbers and groups and interest groups. And if your group of people get into power, it would only favor your group, and it wouldn't favor the other groups. In a secular country, in a secular system, because secularism doesn't get rid of the interest the maslaha behind the different groups. It doesn't get rid of it. It just says, okay, we use elections maybe we'll use elections to decide who gets into power. But when one group that favors their own, when one group gets to power, which would be a majority group, the minority groups, what happens to them? Just look at Iraq. Just as an example, I can point you into other countries around the world that we see this kind of problem. So we see that around the world, in countries in Africa and even in South America, there have been killings, wars, internal disputes. Look at Burma, for example. Just look at Burma, which is where they're killing the Rohingya Muslims. Did you know that there's not actually just one war going on? There's 3 wars going on in Burma. You only see the oppression of the Rohingya Muslims in the south, but there are 2 other separation movements in the north which are fighting the Burma government. So it's 3 wars going on in a secular country. Or just look at the other secular country in the region, Israel, which is to the south of us. How do they treat their minorities? You know how they treat their minorities, and they're a secular country. Or just look at Syria, for example, which is currently a big issue. Who's the leader of Syria? Is Bashar al-Assad? Is he a religious? Is it an Islamic system or is it a Christian system? No, it's a secular system, and we see how that's what's happening there. Just look at the examples of secular countries. Look at Greece, for example. You know, they're starting to, the rise of fascism in Greece is secular, and they are oppressing their minorities. Look at France, for example, the many riots between Africans and North Africans against discrimination and oppression in France. France is a very secular country. So does secularism bring peace? It doesn't bring peace. It just creates, it doesn't even eliminate the religious conflict. It just continues the conflict in a different way. In fact, if you look at a lot of countries, let's take India as another example. Look at India. For hundreds of years, Muslims and Hindus were living in peace. Hundreds of years. Then England invades, and then they create a separation between Pakistan and Bangladesh and India. But even within India, there's still over 110 million Muslims. And see what happens when the majority Hindu population begin oppressing and killing the minority Muslim population in India. It never happened before like that. Never happened. But after nationalism, after secularism, it created fighting, discrimination, oppression, all these different groups killing each other. So thus, if you look at the history of secularism, it's created more wars than it ever solved. I don't even think it even solved any wars. Secularism was established in Europe to stop the wars between the Protestant Christians and the Catholic Christians. But when they stopped that war, there was still World War I, World War II, the Napoleonic Wars. There wasn't many wars still after that. It didn't stop any wars at all. But they want to sell it to us. If I said that if you're sick, and I say I have a medicine for you, but what's it called? It's just called water. What does it do? It won't really help you, this bottle of water, but drink it. I think it will help you. I say, wait a second. It's just water, it's not medicine. It's not medicine. You're sick with something. Okay, sure, you need to drink water normally, but it's not a special medicine that can heal you. But if I sell it to you to say, yes, it will solve your problems, but it's just water, I'm a fraudster. I'm committing fraud. I'm a con artist. So when people sell secularism to us that it will bring peace and unity to the Middle East, it never has anywhere else. And if you look at the Europe, as I said, Europe has problems with its minorities at the moment. But in Europe, all the countries which established secularism were actually countries whereby the people were one race and one religion. They started out being one race and one religion. White English or white French and mostly Christian, all Christian or Christian Protestant and all Christian Catholic. But after immigration of people to Europe, then Europe got tested now. That was the first test of Europe, whether it could handle different religions and different cultures. And look what happens in Europe now. with oppression, discrimination, and many problems and injustices in Europe. Does secularism really bring peace? I don't think so. We also see that if I establish a secular government, let's say I establish a secular government, what will I rule by? What system will I rule by? What values? What will be the values I rule by? Because there is no value. As soon as I establish any particular set of values, it comes from a particular basis. It's not neutral. I'll give an example. In secularism, they say everybody is equal. Okay, where did you get that from? Where did you get this idea from, that everybody is equal? Because if you want to be an atheist or materialist, just looking at the more materialist atheist way, humans are not equal. Some are stronger than others. Some are more intelligent than others. Some are more luckier than others. Some are more healthier than others. Some are fully able, and some are disabled. Some are born with maybe a disability, and so on. Humans are not the same, they're not equal. They have different strengths, different weaknesses. So where did you get the idea of equality? The only basis for equality comes from religion, because you're only equal in the eyes of God. It was a Christian idea, and Islamic idea as well. But secularism had to borrow that. It had to borrow that from religion, because it had no value. There's no value to implement. It didn't have any basis to implement. Secularism can't be neutral. It needs religion to give it some kind of a basis, and it's usually the Christian religion in the European countries. And we see that it was so important for secularism to have a Christian basis that one of the first philosophers of secularism in Europe, called John Locke, he said that we should tolerate all different types of Christian, but we can't tolerate atheists, because atheists reject God and undermine the state. They will deny any religious basis, and so there's no basis for law for an atheist. If an atheist makes a promise, I will do something, under what basis will he fulfill this promise? Because he doesn't believe in any God, he doesn't believe in heaven and hell, there's no accountability for that person. Unless there's maslahah, there's self-interest, there is no reason for an atheist to obey a law or to believe in equality. So John Locke said, we can't tolerate atheists. And he was Christian, by the way. And we see that secularism, most of the laws in Europe, a lot of them were derived from Christian laws. The basis was Christian laws. We also see that there is a new religion that arises in secular countries. They said we want to get rid of religion from a secular country, okay, to stop oppression. But there is a new religion that takes place, and it's called nationalism, or you call it qawmiyya. It's a kind of asabiyya, a kind of group mentality or group identity. And with qawmiyya, like a religion, it has its symbol. It's the flag. You know how people, they kiss the flag, or they salute the flag, they even kiss it when no one's around, like you're giving dua, like you're giving supplication to it. It has, the politicians claim they speak for the flag, they speak for the national will, the national interest. Where did you get this idea of national interest, the will of the country, the will of the people? Every people talk about the will of the people. Who knows the will of the people? It's like it's some kind of will of God or something they talk about. This is in the will of the people. I represent the will of the people. This is the national interest. But where did you get this national interest from? These people are the priests of nationalism. They tell us what is patriotic, what is not patriotic. If you are someone who criticizes the country because the country is doing something wrong, they say you're not patriotic, you hate the country. It's like they're doing takfir on you, they're calling you an apostate, and so on. Nationalism is the new religion of the secular world, and people under this new religion, they kill people in the name of that religion. They oppress people in the name of that religion. For example, in many Arab countries, in many African countries, in many South American countries, if you're accused of being someone who is against the country, you could be executed, you can be killed, you can be arrested. People have killed each other on the name of nationalism, saying we represent the will of the country, and these people we'll kill them, we'll fight each other. As the American social philosopher Erich Fromm said, he's German, he said, nationalism is our idolatry. You know shirk, you know what shirk, idolatry? He said nationalism is our idolatry. It is our insanity. Patriotism is a cult. It should hardly be necessary to say that by patriotism I mean attitude which puts one's nation above humanity and above the principles of truth and justice. As Muslims, it's not the country that is important to us, it's the truth that's important to us. It's doing what's right that's important to us. It's our common bond of humanity to all human beings. That's what's important to us, not this artificial and fake and imaginary idea of nationalism, which some people drew on a map. That's it. I drew the map and say, right, you're Lebanese, you're Syrian, even though you might speak the same language and have exactly the same culture. They make you separate. Then you look at each other separately now. You speak the areas of Al-Sham, now they separate into Palestine, Syria, Lebanon, all of them. You speak of Al-Sham, but now there are 4 different groups of different people now. And as I said, look at around the world of the application of secularism and how many people have been killed under the idea of nationalism. Look at Kenya. In a recent Kenya was supposed to be a secular modern country in Africa. In a recent fight over elections, 1,500 people were killed. 180,000 people were displaced. They had to move as refugees. In Rwanda, a secular country, Rwanda, you remember Rwanda? 1 million people killed, mass rapes in Serbia and Bosnia, and they were oppressing the Bosnians and the Croats. There was three different factions in that. It was a secular country, and it was killing and fighting in the name of nationalism. In Congo, for example, there's been a war for years, for decades in Congo. 5 million people dead in the secular country of Congo. We also estimate that 400,000 women are raped every year in Congo as part of that instability. In Nepal, there's political instability. In Thailand, in 2008-2010, there was a massive political crisis. In Mozambique, there's an ongoing crisis. In Burma, I told you there's 3 current wars going on there under the secular system. In Bhutan, which is near Tibet, there was 20% of the population were evicted because they were accused of not being Nepali enough. We see in Zimbabwe, Central African Republic, the Civil War, Colombia, Haiti, in Brazil, there's 20,000 murders every year in Brazil. South Africa, a secular country, there is mass crime, 19,000 murders every year, 500,000 rapes every year. USA has the highest number of people in prison in the world. The highest number of people in prison in the world is in the USA, not even in China. And China's 1 billion people. We see Salvador, Venezuela, Honduras, and I haven't even talked about Muslim countries who are secular, like Iraq and Egypt and Tunisia, the success stories of these countries implementing a secular system. So, I could go on, and there are many examples, but suffice to say, secularism is not neutral. The ruling party has their idea, and they implement the idea, and they implement this idea mostly based on their interest group, people that they support them in most cases. We see that secularism does not tolerate plurality or multiculturalism. You have to follow one law, and whether you agree with this law or not, it does not matter. You have to follow one law that was made by a small group of politicians. Look what's happening in Egypt, right? It's quite funny. Well, it's not funny, it's actually quite sad, actually. You had the Muslim Brotherhood, they had elections for people to select a committee that would write the constitution. And then the military, they kicked them out and said, oh, these people are oppressive, we're saving Egypt, because the Muslim Brotherhood, they want to implement a caliphate which would unite Egypt with the rest of the Muslim world, and Egypt would disappear. So in the name of nationalism, they kicked out Muslim Brotherhood, they killed people on the streets in the name of nationalism, and then they selected a committee to write the constitution. They selected it, not the people, they did. We've selected the committee and they will write the constitution, and basically this is the constitution which they're going to push forward. And you don't have a choice as to what was written in that constitution. And that's secular, that's the secularists. In fact, if you look at France, England, well, England doesn't have a formal constitution, but it has a kind of constitution. The American constitution, people don't have a choice on the constitution. The Americans did not have a choice. No one chose their constitution. The French people never chose the constitution during the French Revolution. It was written for them, it was applied, they accepted it because they had to. There was no alternative, and that was it. So with the Muslim Brotherhood, when they had people electing the council to write the constitution, this has never happened in the European history. But they want us to do it, but they don't do it. They never did it. I can't change, England doesn't have a formal constitution, but if there was a French Muslim here, he could not change the constitution of France, or the Muslims can't change the constitution of France, saying we're 10% of the population, we should have a voice. They won't accept our voice. But they want us to accept the voice of the secularists. Secularists only tolerate themselves, and they don't tolerate groups which don't follow secularism. Which is why in the Muslim world, you see anyone who calls for Islam or calls for any particular system that's not secularism, they get repressed, oppressed, locked in jail, killed, assassinated, consistently or sickness. We also see that when people say that secularism, okay, maybe this is not a problem, but secularism at least gives us a chance as humans to use our thinking to solve our own problems. And I say, okay, did you make humans? Do you know how humans work? Do you know how to solve human problems? Because if you do not make humans, then how do you understand humans? Human nature, fitra. How do you understand humans? They don't. Sociology and psychology are still discovering more about humans. And the problem is, when people say, like, if you go into the jungle to look at animals, you see animals in their natural environment, and you can study them, you see how animals behave. But what is the natural environment of a human being? Is it in a city? Is it in a hot climate, a cold climate? Is it being more family oriented? Is it being more individualistic? What is the natural situation of a human? You can't study us. You have to see a natural situation. But we don't know what our natural situation is. And we don't even understand ourselves. And because of this, you have the problems of when humans try to make their own system, you get with fascism, you get with communism, you get with capitalism, which has created starvation in the world, which has created where the 50% of the population of the world only own 1% of the wealth. And people who own 1% of the wealth, so people who are 1% of the population of the world only own 50% over 60% of the wealth of the world. We see starvation in Africa, we see mass poverty. It never happened in history. Africa never had famines like it does now. But after globalization, after secularism, after colonialism, it became decrepit, poor, suffering famines. It never happened in its past. Why is this? It's because when humans try to solve our problems, when we don't understand what humans are, we create systems that create monstrous situations. We have to rely on someone that created us, that understands us, to give us a system that brought economic stability for 1,300 years. With no high inflation, no boom, no bust, like you get with the capitalist system in America. Even right now, there is an economic problem, which is resulting in mass poverty in America and in Europe. So I say, is secularism the way forward? I will argue something like this: there is no way forward in secularism. According to Mustafa.
I want to thank the speaker for enlightening us about the topic. It's now time for the question and answer session. Please do raise your hand and ask any question you want. question.
I think I'm scared.
Please.
I want to ask you a question. You said that we should not separate religion from politics. Is that right? And our modern society, how could be like open-minded with religion?
How can we go about it? Okay.
Okay, so people see us in the modern country, religion with politics or without politics, they will say that we are closed-minded.
Okay. It's quite funny. Firstly, religion and politics have never ever been separate throughout human history. And even now, the religion is separate and politics are not separate. Only the definition of religion changed. In the West, religion was viewed as spirituality. That was anything spiritual, anything which is to do with the law is separate. But a materialistic religion replaced it. With its own values, it's called secular humanism, I suppose would be one way of calling it, which believes in a very materialistic understanding of humans, a materialistic understanding of life and human society. Like communists, communists are not secularists. Communists believe in a materialistic worldview where society is the most important thing, and they believe in dialectical materialism. That's a different discussion, of course, for another day. But they believe this aqidah they have informs their political system. Secularists have an aqidah as well, and it informs their political system. So I'm saying, as Muslims, we have an aqidah, and it informs the political system. But I know what you're saying about whether how can we be seen as open-minded. For example, look at China. It's not a liberal state, it's socialist communist basically. Okay, it's materialist, but it's not secularist, it's just communist. And they are quite technologically advanced. And people are respecting them. But in that society, you don't have freedom of speech, you don't have all these freedoms that you see, or freedoms, I don't think that much freedom in the West anyway. But in China, the system is not liberal, not secular, but people admire them for their strength. Likewise, I'll give you an example, that was quite funny. I've criticized Iran for many different things, but I have to be objective about the matter. Did you know Iran, they say people, when the mullahs get to power, will have an oppression, will have a Taliban Afghanistan system. And in the Arab world, they always say, oh, Iran, we're going to be like Iran if you establish Islam. And they said in Egypt, for example, that the Muslim Brotherhood were going to take Egypt back 100 years by creating an Iran-type kind of a system for Egypt. I said, oh really? Did you know that Iran has a spaceport and a space program? And can shoot its own satellites into space? Iran is only one of 10 countries in the world that has a space program. And when Egypt wanted to establish a space program, they wanted to start one. America told them, no, you can't, because Israel is worried. You're going to send up a spy satellite which will be able to look at Israel. So Egypt's program got stopped under secularism. Good old secular Egypt, it got stopped from having a space program. People say, look at Turkey, or look at Turkey, how great Turkey is. Okay, Turkey doesn't have a secular, doesn't have a space program, but it needs help. And Iran said to Turkey, we can help you with the space program if you want. We will give you the technological information. So Iran, a mullah rule system, which looked 100 years back in the past, is the most advanced country in the Middle East. It's funny that people don't realize this. And the thing is, in the Arabic world and in the West, they portray Iran as being backward. That's about media, that's about representation. But if you go to Iran, just objectively, I don't agree with the system. I've criticized it for many other things. But you have to be objective. It's cleaner, it's got better infrastructure than any Arab country I've seen, and it has a massive population support. It's not like a country that has a small population with lots of oil. It has a massive population support. It's about 70 million or 60 million people, and it's very advanced. Under sanctions, under economic sanctions, it made a space program under economic sanctions. So what I'm saying is, don't believe what you read in the media.
Any other question?
Just a small comment. Maybe the role or the
main idea. It's not to look what people look for us or what other look for us, because in the Quran God says, وَلَنْ تَتَّبِعَكَ الْيَهُودُ وَلَا النَّصَارَى حَتَّى تَتَّبِعَ مِلَّتَهُمْ. So the goal or the main idea is what God wants from us, and who is create us, and for him the birth and
Okay, yeah, it's true. The Quran says that the Jews and the Christians will not be happy with us unless we follow what they are following in a sense. And in some ways, people who follow different religions will not be happy with other people if they don't follow their religion. And there's some truth to that. But it doesn't mean that we can act without hikmah, without wisdom. You see, because the Islamic system, Islamic Abdullah Al Andalusi is meant to be a da'wah to the world. It's meant to invite people to it. We have to be an example to the world of an enlightened and tolerant system, but at the same time we are principled, we are strong, we have to be strong, we also have to be principled and think with understanding. When the Prophet Muhammad was asked, why don't you kill the munafiqeen in Medina when you know it? Allah revealed to you who the munafiqeen, who the hypocrites are, who the people who are traitors and are trying to undermine the state. Why don't you go kill them? But he said that if he does so, the people, the other Arabs will think that, oh look, this Muhammad, he kills his friends, he kills his Sahaba, he kills his companions. Because the people don't know who the munafiqeen are, so it just looks like he's killing random people. So the Rasulullah, he understood that you can't just kill people if they keep their nifaq secret. Obviously, if they want to go in public and say, we must fight against this false prophet, and they say this in public, then of course, like any country, if someone tries to make a rebellion, then you have to suppress it, you have to stop that rebellion. But he wasn't going to do that, even though he had wahi, he had revelation, because he knew that all the Arabs outside would think bad things. So we have to use hikmah as well at the same time. But I agree, we should not change our deen, and we should not compromise our deen just for other people. But I'm saying that we do that, we keep on straight with our deen, but also we use hikmah in our public image as well.
Any other comment or question? The sisters, they want to ask any question?
How can we help our children? Living in a secular state, how can we help our children to be real Muslims in a country that actually fights everything against Islam? What do you think is the best way?
The best way for a long time, Muslims have been playing a defensive game. We've been defending. It's time we switch this around. We take back the intellectual fight to them. We tell them about secularism. We tell them, we bring up the arguments and show it's false. And its history doesn't work. Its reputation, it might be good, but its practice, the actual examples of it, fail repeatedly whenever applied. You have to be a very rich country to apply secularism, because only when everyone's happy with food and full bellies, they don't fight each other. Right? You have to be a rich country. But look in Europe, when a European country starts losing its riches, fascism comes up and it becomes really intolerant. Look at Greece, the rise of fascist movement. Look at France, the rise of Jean-Marie Le Pen's Front National, the National Front, fascist group, and so on. When Europe is tolerant and nice when they have money. When they don't have money, they fight each other. You see, and they got that money by going to other countries and taking that. It's not like a vampire. It has to suck blood from other creatures, otherwise it dies. So in a way, in the West, it wants to colonize other countries, or it has to survive, because as soon as it loses its money, it becomes fascist. Look at Germany. Germany was a liberal country. It was highly cultured, very intellectual, but because of after World War I, it lost so much got dead, it became fascist. And right now, there's a rise of fascism in Europe. Not a surprise. I expect that because secularism costs money to make it work. You have to pay people to be good in secularism. So I say educate the children, but also get people to think for themselves. We are too much looking at the West, thinking, what can the West tell us? What can the West give us? Sure, we should accept the technology from the West and study it, the Madaniya, but not the Hadara, not the Thaqafa. We should reject the ideological values and ideas, but accept the technology. Like they did with us, they took our technology in medieval times, but they didn't accept our beliefs. We should do the same. And then, just like they did, we can learn it, and then we can improve it, and then soon they'll be buying our products. So inshallah, as I said, think for ourselves. Start thinking and thinking for ourselves, and then educating, and take the battle to the secularists. Don't let them dictate to us. And study what the Islamic solution is. What is the Islamic solution to poverty? What is the Islamic solution to the distribution of power? I can talk about we need Islam, or the Quran as our constitution. That's nice, but what do you mean? I want details. And inshallah, in my tour, I'll be giving a workshop. I'll talk about some of the details of the economic system later on. So please refer to the Islam for